Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the chapter bylaws workshop. I got a few things I want to go over before we start doing this. Unless you're talking, I ask you to go ahead and remain muted. Be mindful about background noise, especially if there's any background noise, remain muted. And when you go to talk, just unmute yourself. If you want to say something, raise your hand and wait to be recognized. The best way is to use the hand raising function out the bottom where it says reactions. You press on there, and then there's a hand that you can press to get recognition. Another thing, if you have a question and I'm in the middle of discussion, you can put your question in the chat function. Then right down at the bottom too, just left of the share screen is a chat thing that you can turn on, and it'll show your name. I ask that chatting be kept to only those issues pertaining to the chapter bylaws and what we're teaching tonight, or what we're going over tonight. Anybody gets disrupted, I will disconnect you from the call. And I ask you to identify yourself at least the first couple of times if you go to talk. So, do I have any questions before we start? Okay, I'm going to. Okay, here we go. When you open up the sample bylaws, there's an instruction sheet that goes with this. I'm asking chapters to have your bylaws to me by 19th of November. If you need more time, just let me know. And I won't sick Debbie on you until maybe about the middle of December. At the bottom of your bylaws, and I'll explain about the provisional statement later, what that means. When you're doing your bylaws where it says districts, use the reference district number only where it calls for the chapter number. Otherwise, the word chapter used generically in the bylaws should remain as the word chapter. Fill in the highlighted areas, then remove the highlights, and that will be mostly about names of places like the city you're located in and the number of your chapter. Any instruction statements that are in yellow, you'll remove those. And there'll be in italics and highlighted, so it'll be easy to identify. Stay as close as you can to the sample when you're doing your bylaws. You'll be able to adjust these things to meet the individual needs of your chapter, and I'll go over those things as we go through it. But please don't rearrange them, because I got like almost 100 of these things to go through, and if they're in proper order, it really makes my task a lot easier as I'm going through, because I will read all the bylaws. Now, in reading your bylaws, I'm looking for things that are conflicted with department, state department, Legion department, national bylaws. I'm not going to mess too much with your how you run your chapter. I'm not concerned about that. I just want to make sure that excuse me a second. I just want to make sure that your bylaws are compliant to the national chapter and department bylaws. Of course, this sheet will be removed before you finalize and send it to me. All bylaws submitted to department must be signed by the chapter president and secretary. And yes, you can use electronic signature if you want. Use a script signature in the line and include that. Chapter bylaws will not go into final effect until approved by the department. They do go into temporary effect once you vote on them, but they don't go into permanent effect until after they pass over my desk, and then we get them logged in. Now, when you get your bylaws back, there'll be a sheet at the top of the file. When you open up the file, there'll be an approval sheet. And that'll be the approval sheet from the department, i.e. me, that'll tell you that your bylaws have been reviewed and that they're properly recorded and logged in at the department. So, filling in this top part, that's an obvious thing going from here, and I'm not going to go through too much of this first section. Please make sure you leave the American Legion Writers preamble in your bylaws. It's kind of important. Name the organization. This is how you identify it, and shall be in chapter such located, post such and such, herein referred to as chapter. So everything after this could be a chapter reference. If you do your chapter, your number in some of the areas, there'll be a reason why I put that in there. But not a big deal. Okay. The objects are pretty much the organization, membership. There was only one recognized class involved in the American Legion Writers. And some of these areas I'm highlighting in blue because I want to emphasize a few things with them. And just to reemphasize that all members of the chapter must be a member of good standing of the American Legion, the American Legion Auxiliary, or the Sons of the American Legion. I get questions about who can this person do this, who can do that. You must be a member of the parent of one of those three organizations, and you must be a member of good standing, which means pay your dues early for those organizations. Technically, we should not be taking the dues for our riders unless their dues are up to date with their parent organization. The other thing too I want to emphasize with this is the fact that auxiliary members, sons, and legionnaires are all equal as far as being able to run for office and hold positions within the riders themselves. It could be conceivable somebody would have an auxiliary member or a son as department director, so that possibility is there. Members of the chapter must be legally registered owner operator of a highway legal 2 or 3 vehicle. Again, this is one of those provisions that has to be in there to qualify to be a rider. Of course, the passenger doesn't have to be the operator of the vehicle, but if you're a passenger and you're in the riders, you obviously do have to be partnered up with somebody who is a licensed rider. Now, initiation fees. Got any questions yet? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Initiation.
Mark,
yes.
Mark, we're getting a lot of background noise from somewhere. Can you repeat for everybody to mute themselves?
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, the initiation fee for membership includes the first-year dues and costs of the ALR backpack and are non-refundable. Once you pay up for your first year of the pack. Okay, I'm going to get some more background music noise. Somebody's got a radio or something. Please mute yourself. The center patch and the flares are property of the chapter and shall be surrendered to the chapter if the member resigns and is removed from the chapter roster for non-payment of dues or is permanently suspended. Okay, I know that the first question that comes, well, how do we get them to give it back up? Well, that's up to you. There's probably no real practical way to force somebody to give that back. So it is what it is, but they are required by the bylaws. The annual dues for this chapter shall not be less than the amount of the American Legion Riders Department of California per capita dues. In other words, your dues have to at least cover the per capita tax to the department and can be higher. Now, when you can write, there's a couple ways you can write that. You can leave like this, or you could put in something like the dues shall be the amount of per capita plus $5. If you want to put something like that in there, you can put that kind of a specific in there, but don't put an actual amount. Will be $45. The reason why is I'm hoping these bylaws will last a little while, and if you change your dues in a specific amount, then you have to do an amendment to your bylaws technically in order to do that. And I want to emphasize the amount may be changed by recommendation of the executive committee if there is an executive committee, and I'll explain that later. If you do not establish an executive committee, that section could be taken out. Any reference to the executive committee, if you do not have an executive committee, and I'll explain that more later, you can just remove those sections. But the amount may be changed, which means that the amount may be changed upon being read to by the chapter membership being present and adopted by 2/3. So you just announced that at two meetings in a row that you're raising the dues, and then 2/3 vote, and it's said and done. Even if the per capita goes up and you're charging below what's that, you still have to vote for the increase. Although you got to do it. If you don't pay your per capita, then you lose your charter. Okay. Now, this is on the executive committee. This issue came up in the last bylaws workshop that I did. Smaller chapters, you got 5, 7, 8, 10 people. They go, why do we need an executive committee? And that's a very valid question. So I did some checking with a parliamentarian in the Legion side of the house, and our chapters are technically not incorporated because we don't have articles of incorporation on file with the Secretary of State like the Post does, or the Legion does. So we do not necessarily need an executive committee. If you have a larger chapter and you choose to have one, fine, go ahead and do it, and you leave all the other verbiage in there. What I've done here is a chapter made by a 2/3 majority vote of the chapter membership establish an executive committee. You can leave this section, this article in there, so that if at some time you establish an executive committee, you can go ahead and by a 2/3 vote, set up an executive committee and assign the members and then make, and put that into place. My chapter, we have like 15 writers. We don't have an executive committee, or we're not going to have an executive committee. In here it says the post, there may also be when chapter members appointed by the commander of American Legion Post to serve as a liaison advisor on behalf of the post who shall have voice but no vote. Okay, and if the person's a writer, obviously they'll have the vote as a writer. If the person is just a legionnaire or a son, well, if they're just a legionnaire and they're representing the commander, they have voice but no vote, and they cannot force you into doing anything. It would take an action by the chapter in order to change something that you're doing. If they're smart, they won't mess with you too much. If an executive committee is already in place, no further voting or action is required. You can, if you're not going to have an executive committee, then you can take that line out if you want to. Okay, director shall serve as the chairperson. Again, that just pertains to that. Any questions?
Mark, do you have John Smart with a hand up for a while?
Yes, John.
Hey, Mark, so in raising the chapter dues, can that be done by a motion by any member?
Yes. Any
Okay.
member has the right to bring up any motion on no matter at a chapter meeting. If you want to change your bylaws, they can do it. If they want to write a resolution and present it, they can do it. They can do whatever they want. We put these things in here for a process to go through and doing these things so that it just makes it a smoother process and ensures that everybody's involved with it. However, if a member brings it up for an increase of the dues, the bylaws require that you can talk about it at that meeting, and at the following meeting, you can vote on it then. But they bring it up at a meeting, they cannot vote on it at the same meeting. It can't be actually raised until the next meeting. The other thing about dues is that they would not, change in dues would not take effect until the following year.
Okay, that answered my second question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, if let's say right now, today, you decide to raise your dues in your chapter, the dues would remain exactly what they are right now. And then next June, July, or May or June, when the fiscal year starts over, at that time you could raise your dues.
All right, thank you.
Officers and elections. All regular members are eligible to hold office. Okay, 2 rounds of nominations and elections for chapter officers shall be held between April 1st and June 30th. If you want to, you can put specific months in there. You can leave it stated this way if you want to. So if you run into a hiccup somewhere along the way, as long as you have two regular meetings and you do your nominations and elections of officers, you're good to go. I don't want to tie people back into being bound by that. But if your chapter is more comfortable having specific months, then by all means, go ahead and do it that way. Their duties are effective July 1st. The department bylaws say that the new officers start their duties on July 1st. I'm putting in my chapter bylaws that upon the completion of the election that the officers will take over. There's nothing wrong if you want to change that and actually start that early. They just have to be in place and operating by the 1st of July. And of course, they have to be installed by the 1st of September. That's following the guideline criteria by the American Legion itself. If any position of an officer becomes vacant, director may appoint a member to fill that position. Election can be held to fill the vacancy. So if you have, let's say you lose your JA, then you can take the director can assign somebody to that job until you get around to the next meeting and electing a new JA. And if it's an elected officer, you have an election. If it's an appointed position, then you appoint the person. It also says here, and elections will be conducted at the first regular meeting 30 days after nominations have been opened. Yeah. I struggle with that one a little bit, but that's a good one to have in there, because the reason why you want to have that 30-day gap is that it gives, with notification going out, the other members of the chapter will have an opportunity to come in and vote for that position to be filled. especially if it's the director or vice director. The election of officers of the chapter shall be the director, vice director, and treasurer. Those are the three that are required by the department bylaws for the writers. However, any of these guys down here?
What?
Yes, John. Oh, your hand was, okay. Those three offices have to be elected. Any of the other positions that you have down here that you name in here, you can have them elected or appointed. It's up to you. Just make sure that you specify the ones that are elected and the ones that are appointed. In my chapter, we also elect the secretary and the sergeant at arms. The other people are appointed. A member may hold more than one office except for the offices of director and vice director. Those two people can only hold those two positions because they involve with being in their leadership and disciplinary issues. The term of service for all elected appointment officers shall be 1 year at a time. If you want, you can add term limits in. If you're going to add term limits, like, no more than 3 terms, in a row can be served, and then you have to just step out one. I would put that in here there, not a requirement. I know smaller chapters are going to struggle with, you may have career presidents and things like that, but it's up, however the chapter wants to conduct their business, that's up to them. All elected appointed officers shall have only 1 vote in the executive committee or chapter meeting. Again, you can leave this in here. You don't necessarily need to take the executive part out, because if you don't have it, it just wouldn't apply. But all elected, except the presiding chairperson shall have no vote except to break a tie vote. So who's ever running the meeting, that person does not have a vote unless it's necessary to break a tie. Elections shall be held by secret ballot. However you choose to do that is up to you. In case of non-opposed officers, a voice vote may be a method of voting. And what I mean by that is you can vote somebody into the position by acclamation, the fact that they have no competition going against them. So if you have one person running for director, they could be elected by acclamation. That's where the voice vote comes in. I'm not going to delve in too much into the description of the duties down here. Just make sure whatever these people are doing, that's the job that they're doing, and whatever that is reflected in here. You don't necessarily have to stay very strictly to this, but these are just basically the guidelines for the different positions that are through there. Now, ride coordinator, in my chapter bylaws, I'm changing this over to road captain. The ride coordinator will be the person in charge road captain. If you want to use ride coordinator, that's fine. If you want to use the word road captain, that's fine. Either one, that's up to you guys. You have the freedom to do that. There's nothing that says you have to choose one over the other. But that whoever's in charge of that ride will act as a safety officer. That's the one thing that has to be in there. Anybody leading a ride is responsible for the safety of the group, and they're responsible for do safety briefings and to make sure that everybody's keeps up with the group and that nobody gets left behind. Now, membership officer. Smaller chapters are probably not going to have a separate membership officer, but this description is in here. We'll gather new membership applications, validate the eligibility of each new member. In each regular meeting of the chapter, they shall report upon all applications received during or previous to the regular meeting, report all memberships. That just means hang on to the application until the next one. The membership officer shall assure all members are current in their dues, their parent organization, as a current member's operator's license with the operator, current insurance coverage, current vehicle registration, and assign a liability waiver for the current year. It is in our department bylaws that these things must be accomplished on an annual basis, and that's the individual that will be responsible for taking care of that. If there's no membership officer, all said duties shall be done by the chapter vice director or other officer as designated by the director. So that's a real good job for the vice director, but hey, if you want the sergeant arms to do it, you can assign them to it. Just make sure it's reflected in your bylaws. Any questions? Okay. Meetings and a quorum. Meetings shall be held monthly on the day and time and post number. The executive committee will meet as needed before the stated meeting. You can, if you don't have an executive committee, you can certainly remove that if you want to, or you can leave it in there in case you decide to put one in later. It doesn't matter. But it does, if you want to take and have mandatory meetings for your executive committee, this is where you would put them in there. You can structure this however you see fit to meet the needs of your chapter. My chapter, we hold our meetings after the post meeting, and our bylaws will reflect that. A majority of 3 members present, including either director or vice director, will constitute a quorum. And you can almost break this down to 3. Now, the minimum is 3 members. If you got a 45-member chapter, don't have 3 members to do a quorum. You probably should have more like 5, 6, or 7. I wouldn't have any more than 7 members required for a quorum, because if you make that number too high, then you put yourself in the position of not being able to conduct business if you just happen to have a bad month and not many people show up. I'm going to recommend to my chapter they use the number 5. We have enough people to be able to have that and sustain it. Special meetings of the chapter may be called by the director or executive committee, and again, leave executive committee in or take it out, doesn't matter. And must be called upon in written request to 10 members, or 10 members want to call for a special meeting, they can do that. They have to do that in writing. No special meeting shall be called unless announced by the president of a regular meeting preceding, or unless with written notice is sent to each member at least 10 days prior to said meeting, stating the time, place of meeting, and the subject to be considered. When the statement is subject to be considered is put in here, this means that only that which the meeting was called for can be discussed at the meeting. You cannot call a meeting for one thing and then turn around and discuss other business, because it's not fair to those people who aren't at that meeting. They may not have an interest in something if it's for a special thing, but they may have an interest in the other thing. So for the rights of the membership, you can only discuss what the meeting was called for on a special meeting. Electronic meetings are authorized for all official meetings of the chapter using one of the formats identified in Article 16, Section 1 and 2 of the bylaws of the American Legion Writers Department of California. There's a thing in there, it just gives you a long description of what constitutes an electronic meeting, the different methods you can use. Basically,
Mark.
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
just David, District 10.
Yeah.
Can I go back to this section 3 where it
Yeah.
says special meetings, and it says upon the request of 10 members. We can change that to the same amount of members. Let's say we have 5 members or 7 members or whatever that constitutes a quorum at a meeting, right?
You can
Because if
change
you
it.
only
can
have
change it to a
7
quorum.
members, if you only have 7 members, you're not going to ever get 10.
Yeah, and you're totally correct. You know, you can put whatever number you want in there.
Okay.
I'm not gonna back them up for anything like that. My job, believe me when I tell you, I want to make these things function for the small chapters as well as the larger chapters. They have to do that, you know, so they have to meet your need. You know, if you have 5 people in the chapter and you want to have a special meeting called by 3 of them and your quorum at 3, that's fine. If you want to have a quorum at 7 and designate 10 people, if your chapter is that big, you can do that too. So that you have the freedom in order to be able to do that and to establish those numbers as you want them. The only requirement is you cannot have a quorum of less than 3 people, because that's in the department bylaws. And the 10 days notice is mandatory. Written includes email and texting. I would suggest email. I'm not a big fan of texting for notifications, because that's just, sometimes people don't read their text messages, and sometimes they do. And sometimes they don't read their email either. But anyway, any other questions about that? No. Okay. Finances. Section 1 does not mean you are required to have to. It says here on Section 1, all chapters, expenditures, regardless of what conveyance or prior approval of the membership is taken, shall require 2 signatures of the director, pre-designated chapter officers. This is almost verbatim right out of chapter bylaws, post bylaws from the post sample. What this means is somewhere along the way, there has to be 2 signatures involved with expenditures. Now you have a meeting, you take minutes at the meeting. Somebody brings up a motion to spend $2,000 for a bronze statue of your favorite writer out in front of your post. Then you vote on it. When the minutes are done, the secretary signs the minutes. That is the first signature. Okay. The secretary signing the minutes of the meeting where the expenditures were approved is the first signature. The second signature would be the person who writes the check. The idea behind this is that two people need to know what's going on with your money. This is your check and balances. This is put in there because of those who cannot be trusted, not because of those who can. So if somebody takes, oh, let's say $1,400 and spends it on something, you know, and there's nobody else that signs for it, then you can go after them. Finances of the chapter will be held in a bank account within the city of Post. You can be a little bit flexible with this if you want to. You can say the same bank if you want, whatever. I wouldn't, the only thing you can't do is to have out of state storage of your money. It has to be stored with, it has to be in a depository somewhere within the state of California. Simply because funny things happen to money that's kept in faraway places. Disbursement of funds will only be those authorized at a chapter meeting except in case of emergency. Now, you don't have to have emergency expenditures. And I imagine a bunch of guys riding motorcycles are not going to have any chapter related emergency expenditures. So for my chapter, we're putting down $100. But the reason why this is in there, if somebody has a need for something, if somebody has a need for something, or there's a need to purchase something for an upcoming event or something like that, you should have something like that in there so that need can be taken care of. As long as you contact two members of your executive committee. And again, if there's no executive committee, then I would use officers. And my bylaws, my recommendation is director and pre-approved by at least two other elected officers or two other officers, and will not exceed $100 or something like that. So, and then they might have to be disclosed at the next meeting. The content of sections 5 through 7 are specified in the department bylaws. Do not change any of this. Again, suggest you avoid stating specific amounts of dues in your bylaws. So in here, the dues are due and payable by December 31st, and the members' dues are not paid for January 31st. They should be before January 31st. They will be automatically reinstated. If the member is still under such suspension February 1st of such year, their membership shall be forfeited. Okay, what this means is that along February, March, along comes the department, they say, okay, we want your per capita. Before, this was in effect until the end of June. So we had chapters paying per capita on members that were not renewing their dues. This protects the chapter on having to pay that per capita. You will be responsible to turn in the per capita later on if a member does join after that point or makes up with their dues at that point. So you still have a responsibility to pay that. But what this means is that whatever your per capita is, whatever your membership is as effective January 31st, that is what your per capita is going to be based upon. And if somebody doesn't pay until like March or something like that, you put them back in the thing. They get voted in. You put them back in the system, and they get re-registered on the department website. Any questions about that? Well, you guys are making it too easy for me.
I got a question, Mark. John
Yes.
Smart. Okay, so let's say the member hasn't paid their dues, they've been suspended. The chapter's already paid their per capita. Then the member decides to pay their dues, gets reinstated. Does the chapter then send in the additional per capita?
No, if you've already paid the per capita, you do not send in a second amount.
Well, I mean, if we haven't paid per capita for them, let's say they left, and then we paid per capita based on who we had after they left, or got suspended, and then they get reinstated after we've sent out.
So you've already sent in the per capita for the person, right?
No.
You haven't sent in the per capita.
Yeah, let's say we haven't sent in a per capita for
Okay.
that person because they were suspended, and then they got reinstated.
You should be submitting the per capita. I don't know how they're going to track that, and that's personally not my worry. But once a member signs up, if they're reinstated, then yes, you should be paying their per capita.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And not my worry how to track that. So. I'll let the
Okay, Mark,
secretary. Yes, sir.
another question on that.
Uh-huh.
Let's say our dues are due in June, we're due in June, and now there's a time change. So is that 6-month overlap credited? So we only send in half a year's, or what?
Whatever you're carrying on your membership roster at the January 31st is what you're paying for per capita.
Okay, has it always?
Your dues cover from January to December of each year.
Okay, didn't
That
they
is the
come,
membership year.
has it always been the membership year or was it a physical year?
No, it's the membership year. It's based upon your membership. When you pay for 2021, like when you pay for your Legion membership, you're paying, if you pay 2021, you're paying from January 2021 to December 2021. Everybody mailing in their dues right now to the American Legion are that membership year will start the 1st of January 2022. And
Okay,
it's the
thank
same thing
you.
with the chapter. People paying their chapter dues right now are going to be paying their dues that become effective January 1st, 2022 and runs to December 31st. And
Okay, thank you.
that year is the same.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Again, like this is put in there to protect the chapters who thought they had to pay per capita on people that may or may not pay their dues.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on that?
One of the guys, people we ride with there.
Okay, I'm getting some background noise from somebody. Okay, our committees, the finance committee shall be charged with administration. If, you know, again, if you have a small chapter and you don't have a finance committee, don't put that in there, leave it out. You can have this section just say committees may be formed by appointment of the director. The duties and length of the service of these committees shall be stated at the time the committee is appointment. Most of the time, and generally speaking, if a director appoints a committee, once that person, that term is over with, that committee is automatically disbanded. So if you establish a committee that is not identified in your bylaws, if you want to have a water balloon committee, then you can put one in and you put it in here, then you can set that up to recur. But if the director says, hey, I want to do a water balloon committee, then they would be appointed until that term of service is over, then the committee would be disbanded at that time. That's out of Robert's rules.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
Mark, it's Ralph. Hey, Pete, can you mute your phone, please? We're picking up background from it. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Uniform. Vests or jackets that have the patches of the American Legion Riders will conform to the guidelines of the American Legion Riders Department of California Uniform Manual. Very simple, straight. Whatever in the manual, that's what applies. Conduct. This is where we're going to get some, excuse me a second. Okay. Chapter members shall be held to the same standards and conduct as those of the American Legion. And likewise. Now, because somebody is a son, because somebody is a auxiliary member, they still have to be held to the same standards of the American Legion. Because this group is chartered by the American Legion. It's a program of the American Legion. So that's where the standard of conduct is written. Some will probably argue that, but that's what it is. Members of the chapter shall at all times conduct themselves in a manner that respect the American Legion and the American Legion Riders. Every attempt must be made to avoid the appearance of being belonging to a motorcycle club, loud, vulgar language, swearing in public, excessive consumption of alcoholic beverages, you know, all those things that we usually do, but none of us get busted for. So, but we shouldn't be doing that stuff. So, you know, we represent the American Legion and we represent the Sons and the auxiliary, and we need to conduct ourselves in a professional manner when we're out doing that. We're representing them, and all the bylaws must, in that respect, must be adhered to. And our behavior is inconsistent with the standards of the American Legion may result in suspension or expulsion from the chapter under Article 14, Section 1 of these bylaws. We'll get to Article 14, Section 1. Proper decorum will be followed when participating with or interacting members of other motorcycle associations. The other thing about this too is if you go to and this is a requirement of the Department of Bylaws, if you go to a let me say a Hell's Angels rally, do not wear your vest. You can go to the rally if you want to, just don't wear anything that says Legion or Legion Riders on it. That's not going to work very well, and you could be held accountable for it. The chapter or any members of the chapter not affiliated with, associated with any other motorcycle games, other affiliates defined in California Attorney General's office I think there's only about 3 or 4 of them that really are listed in there. Members in the rears. Members whose dues are current the year have not been, wait a second. I got doubled. Okay, that statement only needs to be in one spot. I didn't, God, I don't believe I did that. Anyway, you can just take that out of that place if you have it up in your dues thing. Discipline. Members of the chapter shall be suspended or expelled as provided in the trial manual of the American Legion Riders Department of California, as adopted at the 5th Annual Department Convention and subsequent amendments hereto. The trial manual in sometime in the next year or so, it's going to be going and under a rewriting and updating, and it's going to be pulled into line very closely to the administrative hearing manual of the American Legion. At this time, that if there's something that is not covered in the trial manual, in the department trial manual for the riders, then you would automatically fall back to those specifications and responsibilities that are cited in the American Legion administrative hearing manual. That would come into play at that time, and that will be used in situations when necessary. Okay, member if excused from member may be forcibly excused by agreement of a majority of the officers in attendance in any function or representing the American Legion Riders, and they are judged to be by the officers to be acting in a manner bringing discredit to the organization. This excusal will be immediate and be effective and reported to the chapter director, the chapter membership, and the executive committee. I would take that out of there altogether, the executive committee, because there's really not much. Well, the executive committee. Never mind, leave that in there. Just had a thought because the trial manual. So I apologize. Anyway, somebody behaves themselves on a ride, you report it to the powers of being afterwards and decide whether or not you guys want to do something with it. Any person who's no longer a member of the riders will be required to return the patch. Okay, again, you got to collect the patch. Again, how you go about it, that's up to your chapter. Any member expelled or suspended from the home post unit squadron will be automatically expelled from the chapter. So if somebody loses their membership to their sponsoring organization, their parent organization, they lose their rider membership automatically. Chapter bylaws and amendments. These bylaws and amendments shall not be in conflict with the Department of California. You know the drill here. Anything else that's higher than us. Parliamentary authority. When not inconsistent with these bylaws or any special rules of order, the chapter may adopt, along with the federal, state, and state regulation, the rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Orders, newly revised, will be governed the chapter. Robert's Rules of Order becomes the tertiary or the third level controlling thing. The first level would be the law, corporate law or whatever laws in that particular state. The second would be the bylaws of the organization all the way up down the line. And the third level would be Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules was developed as a purpose for filling in the gaps of procedure that wasn't present in a lot of bylaws and things. So, and it even states that in Robert's Rules. So if somebody quotes Robert's Rules and trying to tell you that, that it overrides the chapter bylaws, that is not true. Proposed amendments to these bylaws must be submitted, and I would go ahead and make this change if I were you, must be submitted in writing at a regular meeting of the chapter, the next regular meeting with the prior notice being given. That means you can bring it in, hey, read it, then you give notice to the chapter that there's going to be a second reading at the following meeting. You read it a second time, and then you vote on it. It takes 2/3 vote to approve bylaws or to make any amendments to your bylaws. Once the amendments are made, they should be submitted to me. If anybody needs help writing an amendment or knows the form, I can gladly help you with that. I don't expect a whole lot of that to be going on. Any amendments or changes in the department bylaws or the bylaws of the American Legion on any level will automatically become effective in the chapter bylaws. So if, let's say, in the department bylaws, you say on the third Tuesday of the month, you must shoot 3 rockets off into the east and say the high holy to whatever. If that's put in the department bylaws, that becomes automatically a part of the chapter bylaws. So just because it's not in there, it applies to the other. Section 3, it shall be the responsibility of the advocate to ensure the bylaws of the American Legion Riders chapter are in agreement with the American Legion National Department you're blah, blah, blah. That means your judge advocate, for your chapter, that's the most important thing he or she should be doing, or they should be doing, is to make sure those things. I'm getting some background noise still from somebody. Could you please mute? District agreement with the judge advocate has to make the determination that those things are falling in line to the bylaws. Also, amendments or rewrite to the chapter bylaws, it's up to the judge advocate to make sure that those are also in meeting the requirements of the upper bylaws. And again, that states that they would love to put that in there. Anyway, these bylaws were adopted on Monday, City, California Post. The two will sign it, the president's signature, the secretary's signature. Be sure to fill out the needed information, the proviso statement below. Now, proviso statement, it kind of roots out of the word provision. Oh, also, if you're wondering what this is about, when you do this document, you write your bylaws, just double click over the footer and it'll bring it up, and then you can put your chapter number in there. Once you put your chapter number in there, you go above the line and you double click it and take it back out. Real easy. Times you need to change a header or footer in Word, that's how you do it. Okay. As approved by the membership of chapter at a regular meeting on, and you put this, and it should be the same month, day, and year, should be exactly the same city and all that stuff as you do when you certify your bylaws. Because when you pass those bylaws, this comes into effect and becomes a part of that. Next year, this means that the officer positions for president and vice president shall change next year at your scheduled election at that time. Then you'll become directors and vice directors. Anybody who holds the position of a president will always be able to hold the position as a past president. The past presidents club and the department bylaws is now the past directors and presidents, past presidents club. It pertains to both of those. But once you're a president, you get to attain that retitle as a past president. Nobody can take that away from you. When they did Resolution 19 almost a year ago, I contacted National and basically told them that we cannot take somebody and have them become take on a position that they did not hold as a past director. They weren't a director. So anyway, I just want to make that clear. And the changeover for the officers will be at that next election. If you run into a major faux pas or a problem in between now and next spring, you want to keep the word president there. Only elect part of your officers at one time. If you can do a complete clean slate election of officers at one time, then you'll have to change over a director at that time.
Mark,
Yes.
David, District 10. If the current president is reelected, he retains the title president and doesn't become dictator, director, whatever the heck that other new title is.
No, he will become a director at that time.
I
The
thought
current
a
president does
grandfather,
not carry over into the next year because he's currently a president.
it doesn't
Everybody who's
grandfather in.
elected headed will become a director at that point.
Okay, so your suggestion is just don't vote them in, just make an amendment and say, okay, well, 2 years on that last vote.
Would it have him hold the office for 2 years?
Yeah,
Can't do that. Office, maximum office in the department bylaws is 1 year. But chapter bylaws and terms have to match the department terms as well.
okay,
So no matter what, anybody running a chapter come at the end in the middle of 2022 is going to be a director. I wish I could change that. I tried, we tried. We sent Arizona wrote 3 resolutions to the NEC back last spring. They were all shot down. We wrote one to the National Convention. It was shot down by Texas. And they just said, and it was voted down. There was no support anywhere by anybody to keep the term president active. There was only 6 departments using the term when they made that change. So there's just, it's just like when we had resolution 4 or 5, whatever it was back in 2015 with the patches on the back. It's happening.
okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so anyway, what happens is next year is I will go through, once everybody has their new elections, I will go through the file copy that I have of your bylaws. I will remove this sheet. This has to stay on a separate piece of paper. Do not add it to up here. Do not stick it just below your signature blocks. Have this on its own page. And with it on its own page, I can go in there with my computer. I can drop that page off once the directors take their office positions, and then we'll go on. But that provisional statements are removed once that condition. A provisional statement is a condition that must be attained in order for a change in the bylaws to take effect. So the change being that would be the elections, and then at that time, the bylaws are taking effect for the new titles. So we'll remove this, and then you'll get a copy back for it. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about the footer. You said there was a way to get that off. You don't want it on the bylaws?
Yeah,
Or is there bylaws by chapter?
I'm sorry.
How do you take that? On the footer that says bylaws by chapter, American Legion Riders Department of California, you want that footer removed, right?
Yeah, the footer, yeah, just click on it, put your chapter number in there. And
Okay, you
identify.
leave that,
I'm
okay,
sorry.
leave that in there then. Okay.
Yeah, leave that in there.
Okay.
Well, when appendix A is removed, that whole page will drop off. So that will stay in there on the rest of your bylaws.
All right.
So if I take and remove that page, that'll be the last page that'll say that. But yeah.
All right.
Anything else?
Mark, Robert.
How are we doing on
Hey, Mark.
chat, Ralph?
Hey, Mark.
Yeah,
Yeah, going back to the quorum issue, what constitutes a quorum? Is it just the officers, or is it members as well, or is it a combination of both?
combination. If you want to make it officers, you can. I would suggest you at least have one officer in a quorum if you're going to conduct business of the chapter. But if you even want to make it three members without an officer, you can certainly do that. The qualifiers, it must be at least 3 people at the meeting if it's in your bylaws, or whatever number you put in there. That condition must be met.
So it could be just one officer and 2 members?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
You know, that's what I'm going to recommend to my chapter that they do, how they do it. So
okay.
that there's at least
Very
one
well.
officer present. Any
Very
other
good,
questions?
thank you.
Any other questions?
Mark, it's Ralph, and remarkably, there are no questions in chat tonight.
Okay, either I covered this adequately or nobody. Okay, well,
Or this is a very, and this is no reflection on the first session, but this is a very smart bunch.
I
I
actually
think
have,
so. Either that or they're just not admitting they have a question.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
have a
anyway,
question.
you
I have
know,
a question.
basically, if you run into a problem, an issue, you have a question or anything about anywhere along the way when you're working on your bylaws, please feel free to contact me by either email or phone number. Both are readily easy to find. I'm here to serve you. This is a customer service oriented position as far as I'm concerned, and I'm here to help you develop bylaws. Your bylaws are critical because they protect the assets of your chapter. They give you the duties and responsibilities of those that are running the chapter. They give you recourse if there's something not doing proper the chapter, so they protect the good name of your chapter if you apply them properly. So that they're not just some square that you have to fill. They perform an absolutely vital function. Basically the circulatory system of the body of your chapter. So, okay, gentlemen, ladies, anything else? Anybody have any comments?
I have a question.
You would. Go ahead.
Now, if we're in another state attending another function and we're wearing our vest, we still are governed by the bylaws for the American Legion Riders Department of California, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mark,
not-
if I can make a comment on that. Hey, John, back a couple of years ago when Paul LaPierre was Area 3 VP and I was the alternate, we were actually in Kansas and saw a California rider in violation of our uniform manual. And we felt it incumbent to address it right there on the spot.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We have a lot of people that are actually out of uniform, but I try not to start anything over that because people are pretty sensitive about their vests.
Yeah, but, and,
Well,
not unfortunately, but particularly the officers of the chapter bear responsibility as to actually the members of the chapter to make sure that the other members are in compliance with the uniform manual.
I agree, 100%.
So,
Obviously, if you're in violation of the uniform manual, you can't get into a convention. So people think, well, I just won't go to a convention. But it's not beyond the power of somebody who has the authority to do so, to tell somebody in a chapter that, hey, you know what, you're in violation, come on, you need to tighten up some.
And I think that, you know what, if you pull that person to the side and do it in somewhat of a tactful manner until you have to get real vocal about it. But and I just recently did that with somebody in our chapter and just pulled them aside and said, hey, you really need to fix this, and this is why. So, Mark, you also have a comment in chat. It says, great workshop, tumbleweed.
Yeah. Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Yes, David, District 10. So, the section, I forgot the number, that talks about motorcycle clubs and all this other kind of thing.
Yes.
So we are being real selective on who we ride with on escorts and funerals and flag lines and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Now, sometimes the veteran whose funeral it is will have a son, daughter, or brother or somebody in a motorcycle club, and they will want to ride along as an escort. And we always meet with them, talk to them, explain to them first that, we're not going to ride with them. We will ride separately behind them, or we will ride with the hearse and the body, and they can ride behind us. But we do not mix and match. The only people we will mix and match with in District 10 are other ALR chapters, districts.
That's an excellent way to approach it. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
You got to be tactful about, there's the rule of common sense that goes into play with some of this stuff. Obviously, if it's because somebody, if they're doing a full blown escort service for an HA, and even though the person's a veteran,
Yeah.
I wouldn't participate in that. But
No.
if it's something that's held by the Patriot Guard Riders or the American Legion Riders or the VFW Riders or something like this, a veterans related organization, certainly, because whoever is putting together that ride has a jurisdiction of what happens within the ride. That being said, we're still responsible to stay in alignment, to keep to our integrity and to ride as a group together.
And also there's the idea that everybody has a camera. And if you are on a ride, like let's say the one that we had for Sergeant Nicole G, and there were well over 400 bikes there. And there also happened to be a few people that belonged to a motorcycle club. But they took the back seat all the way to the back, and they weren't part of the main unit. But if any of the news organizations or other people would have taken shots of us and then taken shots of them and photoshopped it or mixed it in or something like that, that would have been bad.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't put a social condom on everything and
Yep.
and totally isolate. It's absolutely impossible. Somebody's going to blow a hole in it, and we do the best we can when we're involved in a situation like that. And it's sad when something like that gets out of control. It really is. So, but I think if you stay within your group, that rider, and I mean group by riders with riders, then you should be okay. The thing was, if you decide to go to a rally that involves an 81 or any one of the other groups, don't wear your vest. I got a phone call from a chapter wanting to know if a person could wear their vest in a movie, and I said only if it was a documentary. Remember, we have the responsibility of safeguarding the logo of our vests and what's on the back of them. And it's like I said at convention, the back of the vest represent our unity, and the front of our vest represents our individuality. And I think that's the way, good way to look at our uniform manual and why we have it set up we do. So
Okay, thank you.
anyway, anything else? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and shut off the recording.